pronounce your name. Okay. I have B2 in German, so um, so Jakob works in the Energy Transition Lab at the Potsdam Institute for Climate Impact Research, which develops and employs the integrated assessment model Remind. I also use that in my PhD, so thank you. He joined PEAK in 2012 after completing his PhD in numerical methods for computational fluid dynamics. He leads the lab's industry team, which develops a process-explicit basic material production model for Remind and the soft-linked material flow analysis model Remind MFA. And the title of his presentation is Flodym, a flexible and open Python library for dynamic material flow analysis. Welcome. The floor is yours.
Thanks so much. Can you hear me well? All right, perfect. So yeah, thanks for the introduction. And as you can see, I'm not really an LCA person. So this is actually work on material flow analysis and where we've written a library. So this talk is going to be not only about why this package is relevant to you, but also, of course, why MFA is relevant to you. For those who've attended the course, there's some redundant slides, but towards the end, there's also some new slides. The course was more on the how, and today I'll be more on the why using Flodym. MFA is a mass balance. So it tracks the material, one or a few materials, through different stages in a system. These could be, for example, stages of a life cycle. And the system could be a region, the whole world, or also just a production plant. So why would dynamic MFA be interesting, especially in the context of LCA? Well, first of all, it provides stock and flow time dynamics. So it helps you to project future demands of materials, to project secondary material availability, how much of that demand can be recycled or can be saturated from the recycling. It enables you to model intertemporal interdependency. So for example, if your demand is reduced in 1 year, how does it reduce the scrap availability in another? And also it enables you to investigate circular economy interventions. But that's just basically what I think it can contribute to LCA. Also, it's a nice add-on, basically, a different way of investigating because it provides a concise and complete map of a single material's social metabolism. So it's just another way, basically, of another perspective on the problem. This was my attempt, but don't take my word for it. There's a review paper that found 200 studies on LCA MFA combinations. So it's quite a hot topic. And there's also a DDS Autumn School on this next month. In which we couple Brightway to Flodym, and fortunately or unfortunately, it's sold out. Is anyone attending who's here tonight? I see a few. That's nice. All right. So this was why MFA. I'll go a bit into detail what MFA actually is, but let's now briefly look at why Flodym. So there's one tool out there that's already a pretty established MFA library. It's called ODIM by Stefan Pauliuk, and it's great. And it was a great progress because for the first time, there was a general MFA library for the community, which introduced a really nice abstraction of the data classes that you need. So it's pretty established, but in my view, there was still value of basically going further and building on this. Because basically I saw that you could maybe use even more or make even more use of the available data structures. One important aspect to do there is to integrate dimension management. We'll see what that means. And there's also some other functional extensions, some API streamlining. And the overall goal is really to let you write MFA models and applications that are flexible, extensible, clean, and simple. And we'll see in the presentation what that means. So I'll first talk a little bit about MFA. I'll then present how you can do MFA with Flodym, and finally there's an application example. And to go a bit into detail about the MFA, the screen is gone. There's, I don't know. Ah, the TV is off. Did I? No.
Oh, you're fine.
No worries. Ah, nice. We're back. Thanks so much. Oh, no. Ah.
Online people get the good experience.
Nice. Yeah. So, so I'd like to introduce a sample. Ah, maybe I stepped on the cable. I'd like to introduce an example of research questions to explain this by. And this is that you'd like to compare the future emission intensity of automobile production in the EU and the US. And for this, you need the future share of steel production from scrap. So the question here is how much steel is produced from scrap in these regions in the future? And for this, as I said, we track this material through different stages of its life cycle. So here, those stages could be the raw steel production, then some sort of manufacturing, then it goes into the use phase within products, and finally, the material is recycled. And we call every one of these steps where something happens to the material a process, whereas the orangish arrows in between, those are the flows, and those are actually important to MFA. Those are where basically the math is happening. In MFA, we can choose a system environment, which can be a region, the world, maybe your production plant, but also we can use it to basically say where we want to cut off. And here we cut off such that the system remains really. I color U slightly different here than the other because it's different in character to the other processes. The other processes are in good approximation instantaneous. So whatever flows in out immediately, the inflows equal outflows, nothing accumulates. Whereas in the use phase, stuff stays longer, such that whatever enters stays there for a couple of years, right? If a car is produced, it stays in the use phase for like 15, 20 years. So there's now a pretty large stock of material that's currently in use. And this is why we model this here as a stock. And this stock sort of introduces this time delay that stuff stays in the stock until it leaves the stock again. And now we want to see how this translates into algorithmics of MFA. And for this, I first of all introduced some notation, what the flows are called. I just labeled them by the origin and target processes, basically, the first letters of those. And then we can put up some pretty simple equations. So here we assume that the production is exogenously given, and everything that's some parameter that we put in, we label it blue here, and we call it a parameter. Then, for example, the losses could be everything that goes into manufacturing times some loss rate. Whatever goes into the use phase is whatever goes into manufacturing minus the losses. And then there's, as I said, some sort of delay function in the use stock that tells us how much flows out of the use stock. And this delay function is actually such a lifetime distribution function that tells you after how many years it then leaves it again on average, or there's a distribution. And these stock types can actually be different. So this one is inflow driven, basically. So we know how much goes in, but we could also model how much stock we want and how much inflow we need to satisfy that stock. So we need a certain number of passenger kilometers and therefore a certain vehicle stock. And thus we need so much new steel to create the additional vehicles. So far, this is really simple math, right? It's like primary school math, but we'd like to differentiate the system by different aspects or dimensions. So we'd like to do this for several years, for several regions, for several steel grades, for several product types. These are just examples. And then if we introduce these dimensions, then all of these become basically multidimensional arrays. And these operations are different mathematical operations between arrays of different dimensionality. And this is really what MFA boils down to. Like we have a set of dimensions, not all arrays have all dimensions, and then we have operations between the arrays, and we need to manage the dimensions of these operations. And this is basically one of the main features of Flodym, that it does that for you. It handles these operations between multidimensional arrays. It's embedded in an MFA system class, which does some checks and has some read-in and export functionality. It integrates these dynamic stock models with the lifetime distribution functions. It has some functionality to really define the system in a concise way, to really define the layout, which processes do I have, which flows connect them, what are the dimensionalities of these flows. And then there's also input and output and plotting functionality. All of this is implemented with different degrees of integration or customization. So you can choose if you want to do, if you want to use the pre-built functionality from Flodym, or if you want to customize it for your special case. Yeah. And this is basically how the Flodym array, which is like one of the central data structures to enable these multidimensional array multiplication, looks. It's actually quite simple. There's a NumPy array that's just the values basically, but then it also stores dimension information. So for each dimension, it stores the name and the letter and the items basically, so the coordinates. If you've worked with xArray, it's pretty similar to what xArray does. And these Flodym arrays are then used as the flows of the system, as the parameters, but also they're used in the stock models, where there's 3 of them for inflows, for outflows, and for stocks. And let's now look at how we can simplify mathematical operations with that. So if you just use NumPy, and this is what Odym already also does, then you basically, the multiplication boils down to, I won't go into why, it boils down to this einsum operation. And as you can see here, can or cannot see here, you have to provide the exact dimension information for each array for every single operation that you do. Which are the source dimension, which is the target dimension. And also, you have to basically, if you read this, you have to follow what the einsum operation actually does. Whereas in Flodym, it's pretty straightforward. It's just a simple multiplication, really. So this is easy to write, but more importantly, it's easy to understand. And it's flexible, because adding, removing, or reordering dimensions doesn't require you to change every single operation. You just have to do it once in the definition, and this operation basically, from a user perspective, stays the same. This also reduces human error, because sometimes you might forget one or two of these operations, and then it's nice to have this automatically. The same for additions. I just did this at the example of multiplications. I won't go into detail. And also similar structures for indexing. If you do NumPy indexing and you want a subarray, so here, for example, you just want the carbon entries of production, then you have to know where your element dimension is and which of these items carbon is. So it's really hard to read, right? If you read the code, what this indexing on the right-hand side actually does. Whereas in Flodym, you really see at first sight that you want to slice out carbon out of the production dimension. So the advantage is that the code really expresses what is happening and is therefore easy to read for others who then use your model. And also, in addition to reordering dimensions, now adding, removing, or reordering items of a dimension also requires no changes. So if there's another element before this one, then you don't have to change the index. Similar for initialization, where here you have to know the lengths of the arrays to initialize your array, where here you just give the dimension letters. Yeah, and there's further features. For import and export, we rely on pandas, which makes it pretty flexible. So you can just import a data frame, then there's some checks on data consistency. It orders the data, it flags, there are flags to allow missing or excess values. Yeah, and you can also export to data frames, which then makes an export to CSV files also quite simple. There's some plotting functionality. Of course, you can export to data frames and plot the data frames yourself. For multidimensional arrays, it can be convenient to then specify over which dimension you want to plot, which dimension is your color and which dimension is your subplot, and quickly create plots from three-dimensional data. Yeah, and there's stock models that we implemented compared to previous versions. We can now really integrate them into the system. So we can directly basically take the values from the next flow and then use that as input to the stock. We can vectorize these computations such that we do everything at once basically and don't have to write any loop around it. Yeah. And finally, we can integrate the whole thing into this MFA system class, which then offers some more checks, some combined data read-in for the whole system and export for the whole system. You can do these sort of Sankey plots, and there's some checks in the MFA system class. So let's now look at an application example. And this is the Remind MFA that we did the whole thing for. So Remind MFA is supposed to support the integrated assessment model Remind by soft linking it to Remind. And it investigates three basic materials: steel, cement, and plastics. It covers 12 world regions, and but you can actually change the regional resolution to even country level. And the time frame is really from historic times to build up historic stocks up to 2100 in the future. And you can also represent circular economy methods there. And this is just some of the results you can produce. The one I just showed is demand for steel in different products in the future in different world regions, or you could draw such a Sankey plot of the global plastic flows in 2050. If you want to install Flodym, just do pip install Flodym. There's a GitHub repository to look up the code, but there's also extensive documentation. We have quite lots of how-tos, we have examples, and we have an API reference. The Tuesday's course is on GitHub. There's a paper, and here are two publications. This is our in-house publication, but there's also one by external partners that basically switched from Odym to Flodym, and that actually worked quite well for them. So this couldn't be possible without the great team. Thanks especially to Bennett, Merlin, and Falco, and of course to Stefan, who's been very supportive also with Odym. Thanks so much, and happy to answer your questions.
Thank you for presentation. And did you start to try to integrate uncertainty or data reconciliation in all the MFA structure that also are a big deal for MFA analysis when you don't have consistent data all the way for during the graph, or when you want to deal with uncertainty in the graph? So does the structure of Flodym could integrate already some kind of analysis, or do you expect to develop more of this tool to integrate this?
We haven't looked into uncertainties yet. So far, probably it can't. But yeah, this is in active development. So we're really happy to look into that also in the future. Yeah.
Thank you. Actually, I have another question. It seems to me that this tool is in general for dimension management, right? Which is, so meaning that it may have more applications than just the application in MFA or MFA. Can you talk about the other potential application to extend its usage? And also, how do we prepare the data in order to make it useful? Because I can imagine you must know which column is which, right? Like you said, this is carbon. You must be clear about which field is which. So,
Thanks. So first of all, for more general applications, I haven't tried, so I can't really say. I will just say that there's one data class that does these multidimensional operations also, that is called X-array. And that can be used for that. In Flodym, we actually implemented some features that are on top of X-array and that are like, we don't use X-array, but that are not included in X-array, but that are also mostly specific to MFA. So for example, the way we treat multiplication and that we treat addition is really specific to the ways that multiplication and addition is performed in MFA. So I would be hesitant to to put that to other uses, basically, at least without a caveat. But of course, there may be future uses. As for data input, so our preferred way for data input is to really have basically a pandas data frame format, where for every data point you just specify the dimensionality. This is the one that we implemented, and you can read from CSV or Excel files. Of course, you can directly input the NumPy arrays also if you really know what the ordering is. And there's the possibility to implement further adapters, basically, or further input methods. There may be one that we develop in the course of this in this coupling course or the autumn school in November. So there's really lots of potential for extension.
thank you. Okay, we have one question from online. Gabriel, can you speak up your question?
Yes. Hello. Thank you so much for the presentation. I found it really insightful. I saw at the end that you showed cement, steel, and a third material. But if we look at the supply chain for intermediate products, can this structure you offer with the library to easily be used also if we provide ourselves the quantities and we provide the inputs, or it's thought more for initial materials?
I didn't quite understand the question. So you're...
So I can maybe reformulate, but I mean, so if we talk of manufactured parts that then are assembled and so on, so can we also do this material flow analysis on this kind of products also?
Yes, absolutely. So
Okay.
the library Flodym is really agnostic to the dimensions that you put in. There's sometimes you need a time dimension if you want to have a stock, for example, like a dynamic stock model, but all the rest is really up to you. So if intermediate products is one of your dimensions, you're happy to add them. If waste types is one of your dimensions, you're happy to add them. So there's really there's no limits to that, and Flodym makes no choices there.
Okay, thanks so much.
Thank you once again. So let's move on to the next speaker. Marine Vissia. Did I pronounce your name right? Okay, so Marine works as a research software engineer at the Institute for Environmental Science, or CML, at Leiden University.